Hi, this is Elias Knaser, and the following demonstration is from my Citrix XenDesktop 4 training course. Now let's take a look from the server side how we can lock down this client and force the users to only use the settings that we want them to use. So if we go on the DDC, the Desktop Delivery Controller, you want to make sure you've launched the Citrix Web Interface Management and you are on the XenApp Services site. Now I know it's called XenApp here. Again, this is ported from the XenApp product. Hopefully with the next release, some of these terminologies will be addressed. So we have both a XenApp website and a XenApp Services site. When you're working with the Citrix receiver and the online plugin on the user's desktop, we want to work inside the XenApp Services site. So if I right click on it, let's see what I have from an options perspective. If I drag down here to server settings, you'll notice that there's a checkbox that says allow users to customize the server's URL. If you uncheck that, then the user won't have the ability to customize the URL of the server that they're pointing to. So take a look at that. If you think that you want to disable that, I would recommend it. You can go ahead and uncheck it. Well, before we click on it, you can also set up backup URLs and site redirection. So in case the original URL of the first server doesn't work and you have a second web interface server set up, you can also set up backup URLs in here. So we're going to click on OK here. Let's also right click and drag down to session options. These are the same that we saw when we ran into the properties of the actual receiver itself. You can control what the user can manipulate or cannot manipulate. So for example, you can allow the user to go in full screen. So this checkbox is enabled. Anything that's checkboxed here, the user can go into any of these modes. And then from a custom sizes perspective, you can do fixed size. And you're specifying the width and height at which you want the resource to open when it initially launches. So it's not launching in full screen for me. You can also specify the percentage of the screen that you want the original resource to come up in. So if you don't want it to occupy the full screen, you could do 80%. So if I select this, you can specify how you want it to open. Or if you want it to open full screen right away, you can just make this at 100% and the resource will open full screen. Let's keep this back the way it was and take a look at the color and sound. Again, I showed you on the client side where you can control this. You can control what the user can configure here or cannot configure. So if you never want them to be able to go to 16 colors, you can uncheck this. And let's also uncheck 256 colors, for example. Local resources, this applies mostly to XenApp. At least the special folder redirection portion of it applies to XenApp. Up here with the Windows key combination, you're basically specifying where you want these key combinations to take effect, the Windows key combination. You can have them on the local desktop, of course. You can have them in full screen mode, and you can have them on the remote desktop so that when you're typing some of your Windows key combinations, they're being passed through. Now, the Workspace Control allows you to specify how you want to deal with connection or session reconnects when these users are connecting to these sessions through this particular client. So you can customize that accordingly here as well. We're going to go ahead and click on OK. And let's also right click on here and drag down to shortcuts. This is where you can customize where you want the user's shortcuts to go. On the start menu, on the desktop, you can control that and not leave it up to the user. So you can click on the start menu shortcuts, for example, and you can specify what you want to do with these shortcuts. You can use the site settings, you can use the server farm settings, so on and so forth. You can choose to place these resource shortcuts on the start menu. In this case, we're allowing the user to customize it, and by default, it's on the start menu. You can set it to never, the user won't be able to customize it, or you can set it to always. You can create an additional submenu folder in all programs. So if we go on here and say, we're going to create a subfolder called EC, and that's where we want all of our applications to go under so that we are properly organizing them, then you can do that. Now you can allow the user to specify submenu names or not. So if I want to force them to use just what I'm delivering to them, I can uncheck the box. From a desktop shortcut perspective, you can do the same thing. You're allowing the user to customize, and that's what gave us the ability to put these shortcuts on our desktop. So if I click on never, they never will be able to do that. And you can also here create a folder on the desktop for the users if you wanted to do that. And let's go ahead and see how that works. And let's not allow the users to be able to change that name. From the notification area tab here, you can either allow the users again to customize this or not. So you can check or uncheck these boxes based on what you want. So again, you are controlling all the settings that the user has access to on their actual client. From a shortcut removal perspective, you can enable or remove Citrix Online plugin shortcuts, and you can configure how you want to allow the removals of the shortcuts. We're going to keep this unchecked for now. I'm going to click on OK. Now finally, if we right click on it again and do a resource refresh, you are now specifying how you want that client to, how often you want the client to refresh the data from the server. So once you've made changes, it understands when these changes are going to take effect. So here you're customizing how you want the refresh to happen. I'm going to keep these at defaults. We're going to click on OK. Now let's go back to our client, refresh it, and see if the changes took effect. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize my desktop delivery controller here. We are going to double click on the Citrix receiver, and let's go into the plugins. We're going to right click, and what we're going to do is hit application refresh, and we're going to click on OK. Now you'll notice that in some cases the application refresh doesn't take effect immediately. Nothing took effect yet. So in order to force it, what you can do is go back into the Citrix receiver. If we click on plugins here, if you right click on the online plugin and exit out, I'm going to click OK. This disconnects all of your resources. Now, if we click on Start Programs, go back up to Citrix, and click on the online plugin, not the Citrix receiver, but the online plugin. This will force us to re-authenticate. Once we've re-authenticated, automatically all of our applications get refreshed and all of our resources that were disconnected get reconnected to. It's magic. And voila. We're going to minimize this session. Now let's take a look at what happened with the options that we specified to see if we have all of our settings enforced. So if I right click down here, you'll notice that change server has been grayed out, so users can no longer change the server as they could before. If we go into options and we go into application display, we've grayed this out as well. Let's go into the refresh. We've allowed them to configure how they want to do the refresh. From session options, remember when we removed 16 color and 256? It's also gone, so now the only thing they can do is 16-bit, better appearance, 32-bit, etc., etc., and the reconnect options. So by doing that, now you are controlling the settings that the users have access to, and by limiting what they can control, what they have access to, you limit your headaches and your troubleshooting and your help desk calls. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on cancel, and we're going to click on OK. Now let's go into the start menu and see if our changes also took effect in the start menu, and you'll notice that in the start menu as well, everything was organized based on the way we configured it. So it's very simple, very straightforward on how to deal with the Citrix receiver and the online plugin. You can see how flexible it is, and once you've coupled that with merchandising server, then you truly have an end-to-end solution for managing the client's perspective.
Thanks for watching. For more information regarding our training videos, please visit www.trainsignal.com.